Frankly, I'm talking to God all day because there's days when I just want to rip my hair out because I'm so frustrated, whether that's a deal that went sideways or an announcement that's coming that I don't like or that's going to affect me or my team, but just ultimately truly believing He's in charge, as hard as it is to sometimes not worry.
Can you talk to us a bit about how you think Christians can think healthily about tech?
We are being very responsible about the approach to AI. There isn't any other tech company, frankly, on the planet right now that I would want to work at. My faith has been my superpower. And so just figuring out ways that I can navigate the company and making sure that I'm living my true self at work, just like everyone else is able to. When you talk about diversity and inclusion, that's how it looks for me.
You're included too. It's quite interesting reports on what's happening with Gen Z in particular at the moment in the English-speaking world, this kind of real rise in interest in God and a new openness to the Christian faith. And there have been reports of, surprisingly similar things happening in Silicon Valley. Hello and welcome to the lead podcast for Advocate Collective. We're an organisation that supports public advocacy for the Christian faith and provides support for professional therapy to survivors of abuse, church hurt, violence or persecution. And we also empower women in their workplaces towards the Great Commission. And today on the podcast, we are absolutely delighted to welcome Cheri Devlin. She's a general manager at Microsoft, overseeing business applications within the software and digital platforms enterprise operating unit. She's based in Northern California, and she leads a national sales organization dedicated to the most innovative technology companies in the world, with teams strategically located across the United States. Cheri currently serves as the chair of the National Multiple Sclerosis Society Northern California Board of Trustees. She's also a passionate advocate for women's leadership, actively mentoring and leading within Microsoft's Women at Microsoft Employee Resource Group in Silicon Valley chapter. Cheri is also actively engaged in spearheading faith in the workplace initiatives, and her contributions to women's leadership were recognised within the Silicon Valley Business Journal Women of Influence Award in 2017. She is an amazing woman. I met Cheri a few weeks ago in Silicon Valley, and I'm so excited to have her on the podcast. So welcome to the Lead podcast, Cheri. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you, Amy, so much for having me. I've been so looking forward to having this conversation and seeing you again. So thank you so much for having me today.
It was such a joy to meet you and just sort of see you operating in your sphere. And I was really struck by just you as a person as well as a leader. But let's kind of start at the beginning and introduce you a little bit to our listeners. Can you give us a bit of a personal introduction? Where do you come from? How did you kind of make your way to the Bay Area? Give us a little bit of an intro to you.
Absolutely. So came to the Bay Area actually because I met my husband during undergrad. We met at Vanguard University, a small university in Orange County. I was there playing softball, and my husband transferred there as a junior to play basketball. He's very much a Bay Area guy and was not loving the LA life. And so after I graduated, he convinced me to move to Northern California. And so really didn't have anything holding me back in Southern California. I had been there my whole life and decided, why not? And relocated here, and really honestly could not even imagine moving back. So been here for, almost 24 years now.
Wow.
And we're blessed with 3 amazing children. And so, always have come, with the mindset of just very goal oriented. So came from a very, very modest childhood. My parents had divorced at a relatively young age. And so, but when I graduated from high school, I was only 17, but I was very ambitious. And so went straight to university, and again, was just really fortunate to meet Mark during my junior year. And we've been in the Bay Area ever since.
So you sound like the sportiest family on earth. Your children kind of genetic giants of
They are.
inheritance of an extraordinary gene and pool. Yeah.
Well,
So
and
you
it's
all do
funny
lots of
because
sports stuff together.
lots of sports. And actually, while I was in undergrad, I was studying to be a broadcast journalist, and so I was working for
Wow.
Fox Sports West, and I was trying to build my reel. And so, that was what I thought I was going to do when I grew up, was being a sideline reporter. And so Mark, my husband, so I'm 5'9", he's 6'4". We have a freshman in high school who's 6'5" now, so he's quite
Wow.
tall. So
Yeah.
so he's a basketball player, and then my daughter, who is about to be 13, she's almost looking eye to eye at me, which is crazy, but she's not
Oh,
quite embracing the
amazing.
height just yet. And then we have a 10-year-old who is growing quite fast as well. But very much an athletic family, and so fortunate that all the kids are very involved in sports, mostly soccer and basketball
Oh,
right now.
wonderful. Well, I identify less about being sporty myself, but with three athletic children for sure. So you talked a little bit about your kind of career aspirations when you were in college. Tell us a little bit about your career path. How did you find your way into the work that you've ended up doing?
So it's interesting because even when I was in college, I was doing internships, and everything was always based on relationships. And so that
Mm,
started at a very, very young age. But then I was also very involved in doing nonprofit work. But even in the nonprofit space, it was always about building relationships. And that really carried into my professional life as well. And so I had an opportunity to take a temporary job at Ernst and Young, and I just began to navigate the company and had the opportunity to get hired on full time. But I was starting at a very low level in an administrative position, but I was very focused on, this is Ernst and Young. This is one of the big
mm,
four. I'm going to have an opportunity to figure out a way to build a career here, even though I wasn't a CPA and had no ambitions of being a CPA. I was more focused on business development at the
yeah.
time. And so, but it was the opportunity to jump into a volunteer opportunity at the firm. And rose my hand to say, yeah, absolutely. I would be happy to take over. We were basically launching a corporate social responsibility group, and the managing partner at the time was happy to partner with me. And he, at the time, had no idea that I was, very early in career, but I was like, I'm in. And so I remember one of our first
Amazing.
projects, we were partnered up. We had the opportunity to partner up with clients. And it was all about being very strategic. We were there to do something very good in the community, but in that same space, we were also building relationships with clients. And it was an
Mm,
opportunity to do something outside of the workplace. And I think in my mind, it's always been, you do business with the people that you trust and that you like. And so if
mm,
have the opportunity to do something outside of work, and there's that common denominator of giving back, that was a positive to me. And that then lended to other opportunities within the firm. And so I had an opportunity to get partnered up with a mentor at the time, and he took me under his wing, and he's by far one of the best salespeople I've ever worked with. And so fast forward probably 10 years, he landed at Microsoft, and he had approached me and said, "Hey, Cheri, there's a really great opportunity for you. I really think you should take a hard look at it." And he was always one of those people that saw something in me that I didn't ever see in myself. And I think
mm.
everybody needs those mentors where you
Yes.
definitely carry that imposter syndrome. And my mentor, Steve, he always saw something bigger and brighter in me. And so I thought it finally, I said, you know what do I have to lose? I haven't gone through the interview process in a while. And so I decided to go through the process. And after about 5 hours of interviews, I was so excited and fired up, and that I thought, gosh, if I don't get this job, I'm going to be so disappointed now. And then I had the opportunity to land at Microsoft. So it would, again, going back to your question, it was always about relationships. And I think
Mm,
that's been so important and an integral part of my success is
mm,
really building and maintaining relationships. And that's very much been a message that I've carried to my team, my sales team, is
yeah.
the importance of trusted business relationships.
Yeah. Do you feel like you've been able to sort of carry over that? I love the mention there of people who mentored you, who saw something in you that you didn't necessarily feel um, you saw in yourself. I would really resonate with that. I think that's been a huge aspect of my story. And I wonder whether that's true for quite a lot of women, that we often perhaps, underplay our skills and strengths. And we need people to see us and call us out and give us opportunity. But do you find yourself now doing that for younger people? Do you feel like you're in a position now to do the same, to kind of pass it on?
Absolutely. And I think it's so important because I feel as though women have to help women. I think, one of the
Mm,
programs that I lead at Microsoft, it's called Better Together. And we literally, women are better together. And I think that there's definitely groups of like kind of that mean girl mentality. And we are,
yeah.
I really, really am mindful of making sure that we're everything opposite of that. And I've even
Mm,
witnessed that with my daughter, who's, a middle schooler, and seeing how girls can be so fierce and mean to each other. And that was a
mm,
big driver of why we pulled her out of traditional school recently to homeschool her for the second semester before we move her to a new school where her older brother's at. But it's so important to mentor. It's so important to lean within each other because as we look up the corporate ladder, there's less and less women. And I think it's
mm,
really important that we're supporting each other, that, we iron sharpens iron. And we talk about that so often at work. And it's important that we're helping build each other up because
mm.
too often you run into scenarios where um, there's this unhealthy competition. And
Yeah,
so, it's important to make sure that mentorship is very much a part of my day to day. And so I make an intentional effort to mentor women. I do have mentees who have been men over the years too, but I do make sure
absolutely.
that
In a
women are
way,
being supported.
that's also super powerful, isn't it? Because
Hmm.
you're modeling something really, really important then, that women can
Right.
mentor men as well. Here in this country, we had our first female prime minister, Margaret Thatcher, famously. I mean, this is a long time ago. So I was a child when we had a female prime minister and head of state, the Queen, two women. But she was known as a woman who didn't help other women. She sort of got the Margaret Thatcher. I mean, she kind of got to the top and then pulled the ladder up after her. So I feel like it is something we have to be intent. It doesn't just happen necessarily because we're women. We need to be intentional, right? So
Oh, absolutely.
yeah, you talked a little bit about, or in your bio, sorry, it mentioned your kind of interest in faith in the workplace. Can you tell us your story of how you came to faith, and then maybe we can talk little bit about how that interacts with your career and your leadership journey.
Yeah, so it's interesting because, I grew up in a Christian home. I always viewed myself as a Christian, even through my parents' divorce. But the Lord, Jesus was always in my heart. And I think
Mm,
about the hardships that I went through as I was young. But it wasn't until I got to Vanguard, and Vanguard it's an Assemblies of God university. But I remember people kind of giving me a hard time about, I can't believe you're going to go to a Christian university, and because they were shocked about that. And I was kind of like, geez, kind of a little bit offended about that. But I understood because my journey, my faith was kind of up and down, but Jesus I knew was always in my heart. But it wasn't until I got to Vanguard where I hadn't really dealt with my parents' divorce, I think,
mm.
fully. And my coaches made me go to counseling and really begin to
Wow.
really understand what was going on inside of me, because I was bitter and I was angry. And I had a lot of baggage that I needed to, and healing that needed to happen. And that's where I think my relationship with Christ started to finally evolve again. Because I remember when I was really young, I was on fire for Jesus. I look at pictures when I was little, and I don't, and I just remember like being very involved in the church. So there was just those teenage years where I don't want to say I walked away, but I definitely was doing my own thing. And so I was so
Mm.
grateful that I had that opportunity to go to Vanguard and find myself and find my relationship with Christ again. And my husband, who I love so much, when I met him, he wasn't a Christian. And that was sort of a deal breaker for me. And I remember my mom saying, just
What
pray
was he
about
doing
it.
at what was he doing at a Pentecostal university?
He got
Oh,
a
was it the
scholarship
softball?
to play
Okay.
basketball. And oftentimes you
Gosh.
see that happen with athletes as they
Yeah,
get there,
of
but God can
course.
transform their
Yeah.
heart. And my mom
How
just said, pray
amazing.
about it, just pray about it. And I did. And the Lord worked it out, and he was absolutely meant to be. And so then I think about my professional career, and I feel like God is my superpower. I've been through
Mm,
so many like incredibly challenging situations where I've had to lay off people, where I've had to let people go, where I've had to have very difficult conversations, when I've had to face results that were not favorable, where I had to be very humbled. And people have often said, like, how do you do it? And my response is, I pray a lot. I pray before I have to go into a big meeting. I pray
Mm.
before I've had to go into scenarios where I've had to lay off people. And so Jesus and having Christ in my heart is my superpower. Now, that being said, working in tech, it's a little taboo at times to talk about your faith, especially being a leader. And
Mm.
so I have to be a little bit sensitive to how,
Of
open
course.
I am. I wear a necklace that has a cross on it. I think that sometimes is like a tell, if you will. But then also it was interesting how God was just planting people at Microsoft that were crossing paths with me. And all of a sudden I was like finding other Christians at Microsoft. And it was like, oh my gosh, like God was totally stirring. And then I was introduced to a group of Christians at Microsoft who pray on a Teams meeting every Wednesday at noon.
Wow.
And then they give devotionals. My one of my team chats, so our platform where we collaborate as teams. And so there's messages where people are praying for each other and you're able to, ask for prayer. And so it's been very comforting to know that even in a
Mm.
gigantic company like Microsoft, that there's other Christians. And so for
Yeah.
me, having my faith has been my superpower. And so just figuring out ways that I can navigate the company and making sure that I'm living my true self at work, just like everyone else is able to. When you
Mm.
talk about diversity and inclusion, that's
Yeah.
how it looks for me.
You're included too. It's quite
Hmm.
interesting reports on what's happening with Gen Z in particular at the moment in the English speaking world, this kind of real rise in interest in God and a new openness to the Christian faith. And there have been reports of, surprisingly similar things happening in Silicon Valley, right? I mean,
Hmm.
it feels like in the last couple of years in particular, a greater openness to faith and those kinds of conversations. What do you think's happening there? What's that about, do you think?
I just believe God is stirring in tech. I
Mm.
really truly believe that, and that's what started this whole notion of faith in tech. And we have to start creating space for Christians in the workplace to come together. And we joked we were kind of like this underground society, and we were trying to figure out how we can bring these groups together. And we had amazing people like you willing to come and speak at our events, and then you see this energy coming out of these events, and we try to
Mm.
keep them relatively intimate, but it was clear that there is a desire to have this community. And so we're trying to make sure that we're having a regular cadence of these gatherings because there is such a strong desire. And I look at
Yeah.
like the 20 somethings to 40 somethings at our church, and it's incredible to see the energy and how passionate they are for Christ. And so
Mm.
it's really comforting for me because let's be honest, I mean, like there's days that are hard. There are days really that are hard where I'm like, okay, God, like I need you now, And
Yeah.
so I think
What
it's
gets
very
you through so
encouraging.
what gets you through those, Cherry? So if you're facing like a protracted period, not just like one day, but let's say a kind of difficult season, which we're all going to have in life,
Right.
including those of us who are followers of Jesus. We're going to have really, really hard things happen to us or hard seasons. So you talked about prayer. Um, can you share more? Because I think sometimes people think maybe that sort of deeper Christian life or that sense of God actually carrying you through things is reserved for ministry space or for church on Sunday or whatever. Can you share what are some of the practices that have helped you? Um, what do you actually do when things are difficult and you need to see God come through for you?
Yeah. So, like, for example, in the morning, like when I'm having these difficult periods and I start to feel the anxiety coming up,
Mm.
because anxiety is something that I dealt with for many, many years. And prayer is really what helped me get through it. And
Mm.
so in the morning, when the alarm first goes off, I'll hit snooze for 5 minutes. But those 5 minutes, it's not for me to go back to sleep. It's for me to just like ask God to just ground me for the day
Yeah.
and just bring peace of mind that it's going to be a great day. It's going to be a great
Mm.
day and God's going to be with me. Or if I just need to give something to him, that's a weight that's been on my shoulders or that's been weighing me down, or just asking God for the strength to get out of bed because I know that it's going to be a really hard day, or
Mm.
strength to just get to the gym. So exercise is a big one for me too. but it's really starting my day just having that conversation with God because the days are hard. My career, the job that I have is very demanding and it's stressful. And I'm truly, really, really trying to find balance to make sure that I'm meeting my kids where they need me to be on a
Mm,
daily basis. And then also, I'm
mm,
trying to be a good wife to my
mm.
husband. And so there's a lot going on. And so this notion of work life balance, I don't know if that really exists. Like you hear a lot about like
No.
work life integration now. And so I think for
Yeah.
me, it's making sure I'm keeping God at the top and then
Mm,
my family and then work. And I think
mm.
last year I got my priorities out of whack and work was creeping to the top for too many consistent months. And, I had to have God showed me that, hey, I'm in charge.
Yeah.
Remember, I need to be in
Yeah.
charge. And it was important to get those priorities back straight. And so I think the practical thing for me is God knows everything that's going on. There's no use trying to lie about it to yourself. And so
Mm,
I just really try to be honest with God about kind of where I'm at and the help I'm needing. But I really try to do that at the very beginning of the day.
mm.
And then frankly, I'm talking to God all day because there's days when I just want to rip my hair out because I'm so frustrated, whether that's a deal that went sideways or an announcement that's coming that I don't like or that's going to affect me or my team. But just ultimately truly believing He's in charge,
Mm.
as hard as it is to sometimes not worry, it is
Yeah.
really making sure that, God's in control.
I think there are periods in life as well, aren't there? So my children are getting older now. So my twins are at university, and I've still got one in high school. But particularly when you're really in the trenches of three kids at home, full on career, you're trying to follow Jesus, serve your husband, and then people. I remember in that period in my life, people saying to me, "And what are your hobbies?" And I'm like, what are you talking about? At this point, I'm lucky to kind of, yeah, I sort of, you just fall into bed at the end of the day and just pray for the strength to keep going.
That's why I
And
work out
and
at 5:30 in the morning.
yeah, very good, excellent, yeah. But I mean, it's interesting that connection as well between the body and a healthy spiritual life. Again, that's something I've been exploring a lot in the last couple of years, and noticing how in the Bible that kind of embodied sense of who you are, where you are, what's happening is really there in the narrative of scripture, whether it's in the story about Elijah where you see has this kind of great spiritual breakthrough, and then the crash that comes afterwards is experienced as like not wanting to eat, massive fatigue, low mood, and how God is actually interested in our spiritual life and health and well-being, but also our bodies. I think another area, and we talked a bit about mentorship, but for the women who are listening to this, and there will be lots of women who have corporate jobs, others who are working in ministry, others who are sort of predominantly at home at the moment for whatever reason, some in education. But for all of us as women, there's another element which is, I guess, about our friendships and the life of our emotional life and well-being, not necessarily our romantic life partner, but the friendships that sustain. And that can be different from, say, our work colleagues or people who we're serving with on a team or who we're leading on a team. So as a woman who's very successful at what you do, who's got a lot going on, you've got kids at home, you've got a successful career, do you have any kind of practical tips for cultivating friendships that sustain a kind of wholeness of life and also of your calling? How have you managed that, and what does friendship look like for you, and how do you put a priority on that?
Yeah, so, I think that what was kind of a game changer for me was finally developing relationships with other Christian women. So, have
Mm,
had very strong friendships, women that I've been friends with for many, many years that are part of my circle that I know that would always be there for me, that I'm very open with my faith about, but they're not necessarily the friend that I'm reaching out to for prayer. And
Mm.
so probably about 5 years or so ago was able to get, and I could be dating my years a little bit off here, but I think it was about 5 years now. And it was a group of women at church that we started to get more involved, and our relationship began to evolve. And I still, to this day, we have a little chat on texts. And when anything's going on, it's just a quick text to each other. Like we literally got a
Mm.
text from one of the ladies yesterday whose husband had a heart attack a couple of years ago, and he
Oh.
was having some things going on and they had to take him in to just get checked. And it's just knowing that you have this support system of other Christian women who are there for you. So it's a quick, I need some prayer. It's, hey, I'm having a really rough day. It's, hey, can we grab a quick coffee? And it's making sure that those relationships are being cultivated, that we are keeping in touch. And if it's been a little bit of time where I haven't seen you on Sunday, or hey, I haven't seen you Wednesday at our women's group, that we're checking in with each other because something
Mm.
must be going on. And so yeah, I think it's important that we make sure that we have that support system of other Christian women. And I think that's
Mm.
what I was really lacking. And I was praying for that for many years of, I had really, really strong friendships and people I could depend on, but I've been praying for other strong Christian women to come into my life.
Mm.
And then I was
Mm.
really fortunate that God was able to bless me with meeting some of these women, and then we got to serve at the church together for some time, and that opened some new doors and provided opportunity that wasn't there previously. And then we've continued to stay really good friends. And even though we're all kind of doing different things and we're not as involved in the ministry at church, but we're still doing other things like what I'm trying to accomplish at
Mm.
Microsoft. But I think it's important because it's easy to get caught up in the world if you don't maintain those healthy Christian
Yeah,
friendships.
we all need that sort of support.
Yeah.
And I guess also sometimes for women in the church who haven't necessarily seen female role models who are leading in the kind of way you are in a major industry and who love God, like you clearly do. What would you say to younger Christian women who haven't necessarily seen that in their own church or their own experience? Perhaps the women in their own church are more kind of domestically focused or just don't necessarily have a natural kind of shared interest, whether it's sport or whatever it is, academics. Um, what would you say to women like that, perhaps even who feel they might be called into a career in tech or the corporate world and wonder, could God be in that? Could God be calling me to that? What would you say to someone like that?
I mean, I would say believe in yourself that like there's purpose. Like we all have purpose, and God's so intentional about the path
Mm.
that He's paving for all of us. I mean, I think it's interesting because the friendships that I've cultivated at church, they've been with other corporate women, but they've also
Mm.
been with women that I wouldn't have necessarily like matched up with if it wasn't for the common denominator
Mm.
of our faith. And so I think it's important that you find something that you're passionate about, and then and the ability to build relationships with others to have that faith. I think that's just, I don't know, I guess for me there's just comfort in being able to talk openly with other women,
Yeah.
whether you're
Yes.
a homemaker or whether you're a CEO. I just always find comfort in just being able to be super open about my
Mm.
relationship with God and the good, the bad, the ugly, and knowing that, or at least believing that I'm not being judged because of my faith, or I'm not
Mm.
being pigeonholed into a certain stereotype because of the way I look and because I'm a Christian.
Mm.
And so I would say for those women, go for it. Don't be afraid. Go for it and trust that God's being super intentional about
Yeah.
the road that He's paving for you.
Amazing. And I guess there are other questions around tech, aren't there, at the moment, and some of the sort of ethical challenges that are being thrown up by the rapid changes coming down the line with AI in the culture. Also, the challenges of tech just for the mental health of young people. You're probably managing that, I guess, if you've got three teenagers at home. Can you talk to us a bit about how you think Christians can think healthily about tech?
Well, I mean, I guess for me personally, I have a lot of confidence in the leadership of my company, like, of our
Mm,
CEO. So I feel very confident in the way that we are approaching AI, and
yeah,
we are being very responsible about the approach to AI. So that's part of why I love working where I work. There isn't any other tech company, frankly, on the planet right now that I would want to work at.
mm,
And so I think, so for me, it's making sure that I'm also trying to like set an example at home. It's hard when everything is on a device or on a computer.
yes,
And so I really do try to have like a shutdown period at home so that there is time when I'm just dialed in with the kids. And in the
mm,
mornings, there's a time where we have a small amount of time. We got to get everybody out the door. We've got lunches to be made and we've got to make sure that everybody's on time. And so, but the kids also know that there's certain times of the year where mom's going to be super, super busy. And there's
mm.
going to be late night calls or there's going to be super early calls, but just trying to establish some boundaries and maintaining those with the caveat that certain times of the year things are going to look a little bit different. But then also trying to make sure that,
How do you enforce that? I've got a friend who's got like a mega switch that can just turn the internet off in the house, at which point
well,
everyone is
exactly.
enraged.
Right. Well, and so like the
How
young one, like so, and if I'll be honest, I feel like we probably gave the phone access to the middle child a little earlier, but it was a safety thing too because she was
yeah,
at different tournaments and
yeah,
without us,
yeah.
and it was a matter of being able to reach us. But
Contact him.
but it's
Yeah.
also like I've got full access, so I can audit that phone whenever I
Mm,
want. There's no application that can get added to the phone without my husband or my permission.
that's
Social
great.
media is a no-no. Like the kids, they don't have access to social media. My high schooler does now, but even that's regulated.
Mm,
I'm one of his, connections on Instagram. Mostly it's him posting his basketball highlights. So,
scores. Yeah.
and I think what's crazy too, though, is like even with the teenagers, like recruiting was very different when I was in high school. Like getting looks from different
Yeah.
colleges and whatnot. Like these teenagers, they have to have these.
A profile,
Yeah, because
absolutely.
that's how they're
Yeah.
getting looks. But it's also making sure like that they know that I'm looking. And
Mm,
as much as I don't like social media, I have to force myself to get on there and
mm,
scroll and look because I'm trying to make sure that I'm keeping up with whatever they're looking at. And
yeah.
so, but so it's not perfect by any means, but it is trying to establish some form of boundaries and having some quiet periods for myself included,
Mm.
and that we're doing those surprise audits so that you never know when mom's going to take your phone and take a peek
Yeah.
at what's going on.
That's so good. And I mean, we need that ourselves, don't we?
Yeah,
Just to the self-discipline to kind of put it down and step away from it. It's going to be a fascinating 5 to 10 years, isn't it, in this space? If you think
fascinating.
about the changes to, I was at university in the 1990s when you went to a lab to send an email. I mean, it was like a different world, let alone
Hmm.
obviously the smartphone. So, how we prepare ourselves as followers of Jesus to be, connected to God, connected relationally with those we love, fulfilling our calling in this world and not sort of distracted or deflected or wasting loads of our time with stuff that doesn't matter.
Right.
Um, yeah.
It's crazy because when I think about the conversations that I'm having with CIOs and chief revenue officers and just various C-suite that we're engaging with, it's where agentic AI is going and what the future state is going to look like with what AI is going to be doing for us. That we will have
Mm,
everyone should have a personal assistant that's going to be helping us throughout the day. But this notion that bots are going to take over the world, I don't believe that at all. And now
no,
there's going to be some
no.
efficiencies gained because of
Yeah,
what AI is going to be able to do. I think as a Christian, though, I think it's super important that we stay grounded in our faith, because I think what
absolutely.
scares me is just some of the future state of what the like making sure that our children don't become isolated and that there's still this notion of relationship that
Mm,
when I hear about this tech, the ability for people to become so connected with something that's not
not a
real.
person.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
that's troublesome for me. And
Mm,
so I think it's important that we really stay grounded in the importance of human relationship, that we
mm,
can communicate effectively with each other, that my children can communicate with each other, with me, with their friends, we pick up a phone and call, that not everything is driven by text. But
Yeah.
I do think that there's going to be a ton of benefit in what AI is going to be able to do to drive efficiencies in our day to day, and then also across the enterprise.
Yeah, it's already happening, isn't
Right.
it? I mean, it's the world is changing. So I've got two more questions for you. So penultimate question is, can you share a little bit about what resilience means to you and how you have kind of weathered storms in your own life, your walk with God, and how you've kind of built resilience intentionally?
Well, so gosh, there's a lot of different ways I could
Yeah.
answer this question, but I think the most recent example of that is the importance of keeping God at the top. Like the point I made earlier about priorities. I had a very, very challenging professional year last year. And I look back and I'm actually very grateful that I went through it now, because it just was such a clear reinforcement of the importance of keeping God at the center of my life, but also at the top of the priority list. Because when He's not, it's everything is out of balance. And there's definitely seasons when you're super busy, and there's different seasons when the kids are taking more, but it's just so important to make sure that you're keeping God at the top. And for me, it's a matter of trusting that even in the rockiest situations, that He's going to get me through it. And last year was that for me. And so and we had to make some big decisions with our daughter, this past just a few months ago. And that was a big leap of faith, because as busy as my career is and my husband's career is, that idea of homeschooling was scary. But I just know that it was the right decision, and it was because I trusted God was going to get us through it. And so resilience to me is just truly, truly believing in even the hardest situation. We have to remember that we cannot do it on our own. And I lived through that last year.
And every time you live through that, you're building that resilience in, aren't you, for the future? That's amazing. Okay, so we ask every guest that comes on the podcast this last question. And the question is this: if you could say one thing to your younger self that you know now, but you look back at Cheri aged 21 or even 18, and you sort of think about all the potential, but also all the kind of hang-ups and challenges and difficulties, and if the you today could really say something to her that she could hear and kind of deeply take into her life, what would it be?
Gosh, it's something that I probably still need to remind myself of, is that you're special. I think I still suffer imposter syndrome at times, and it's sometimes hard for me to see myself as successful. And so I just think it's looking back and telling that person, like, you are amazing. Like God was very intentional with you, and just believe in yourself, because I think that's hard.
Yeah, it's really hard. And I hope that encourages everyone listening to this, because here's a senior person working in Silicon Valley in a major role in a major tech company. And it's the same struggles that all of us have. But the Bible says we've been made in the image of God, and that we are so loved by our Heavenly Father, and that He has plans and purposes for us, specifically, personally, not just generally, as blob human race, but for each and every one of us. Cheri, thank you so much. Thank you for being a woman who loves Jesus and who is, representing Him in such an important space in our world right now. Thank you for being a woman who leads with integrity and leads teams and mentors others and creates opportunities for others. Thank you for setting an example to Christian women that a career in tech can be a calling, career in sales can be a calling from God, and it can be a really exciting and wonderful path in life. Thank you for sharing something of yourself with us today as well, your struggles as well, and how you've come through them. It's been really amazing to have you on the show. So thank you to everyone for listening today and tuning in. I hope that you are enjoying this podcast. And if you are, can I ask you to do us a huge favor and leave us a really good review? We'd love 5 stars, please. And could you think about following the show as well, and maybe sharing this with a friend who it would be helpful for them and you think they would love it. Thank you so much for joining us today, for listening to the Lead podcast for Advocate Collective with me, Dr. Amy Orr-Ewing, and with Cheri Devlin today. Thank you for joining us, and join us next week for another conversation.